A soft whisper carried through the night air. "It hurts, sir. Please help me." In that fragile moment, a powerful man's world shifted forever. Landon Reed, a millionaire CEO who had everything money could buy but nothing his heart truly needed, stumbled upon a little girl who had nothing left except the strength to ask for help. What began as a chance encounter in a quiet park would unravel into a journey of healing, love, and second chances. This is not just a story about wealth or success. It is about listening when a child dares to speak their truth, about showing up when no one else does, and about how the smallest voices can change even the strongest hearts. Stay with us as we reveal how one whisper transformed two lives. And don't forget to subscribe to the Retold Stories for more unforgettable journeys. Landon Reed should have been standing beneath golden chandeliers that evening, surrounded by the polite applause of Charleston's finest. His name was etched on a silver plaque, another Lifetime Achievement Award waiting to be collected. But instead of basking in artificial admiration, he found himself on the quiet edge of Burwood Park, pulling his collar tight against the cool spring air. It was not the breeze that chilled him, but the hollowness that had followed him for years. He could still hear the echo of a laughter that no longer filled his home, see the warmth in a smile frozen forever in a photograph. Emily's hand resting gently on her stomach haunted him each time his phone screen lit up with that saved image. The world knew him as a visionary, a man who built towers of steel and glass, but in truth he felt like rubble dressed in expensive suits. He wandered deeper into the park, the sounds of celebration from downtown fading into the distance, until only the rustle of willow branches remained. The gravel paths curved gently through flowering dogwoods, petals falling like confetti on stone, and each step was less about direction and more about survival. Walking was his therapy, a motion that dulled the sharpness of grief. At least it used to. That night the ache remained, stubborn and unrelenting. His thoughts drifted between the emptiness of his mansion and the emptiness inside his chest, both echoing louder with every step. Then he saw her. At first glance, he thought the bundle on the bench near the duck pond was nothing more than forgotten clothing. But as he drew closer, the shape shifted into the fragile outline of a child. A little girl sat curled at the far edge, barefoot, her toes red from the cold stone beneath them. Her dress was torn, her sleeves tugged down over thin arms, as though she could shield herself with fabric alone. She did not cry, she did not even shiver. She simply sat still, like a statue someone had abandoned. Landon froze. The sight jolted through him like an electric current, stealing his breath and grounding his feet. When she lifted her head, their eyes locked, and in that single look he saw pain, fear, and something heavier than both resignation. Then her lips parted. Her voice was almost lost to the wind. "It hurts, sir. Please help me." His knees nearly gave out as the words pierced the silence. Without thinking, he dropped to the ground beside her, careful not to startle. His chest tightened, not just with concern, but with an old terror clawing its way back from the depths where he had buried it. Her face was pale, her eyes ringed with exhaustion, her cheeks smudged with dirt and something darker that might once have been blood. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Sweetheart, where's your mom or dad?" The question seemed to wound her more than comfort, and she shook her head slowly. "No one's coming," she whispered. The world tilted. In that moment, the distant hum of traffic, the chatter of night creatures, even the faint laughter from the gala felt unreal compared to the fragile truth sitting in front of him. He held out his hand, palms open, asking gently if he could look at where it hurt. After a long hesitation, she uncurled her sleeve. The sight knocked the air from his lungs. A jagged purple bruise stretched across her arm, joined by smaller bruises that told of a history no child should bear. Landon did not speak, did not move. Something inside him had already broken. She was not simply lost. She had been hurt and forgotten, carrying silence heavier than screams. When he asked her name, she lowered her gaze. "Sophie," she whispered. "Sophie Allen." He nodded, swallowing the nut in his throat. "All right, Sophie. I am Landon, and I am going to help you." She did not resist when he lifted her into his arms. She was far too light, a fragile weight that fit against his chest as though she had always been meant to be carried. Her head rested on his shoulder, her breath shallow and unsteady. She did not cling, yet she did not push away either, hovering in the space between fear and surrender. Landon stood frozen for a long moment, the world around them unchanged while his shifted entirely. This was not chance. This was not distraction. This was the first moment that mattered in years. As he walked out of the park, her small hand clutched at his collar, weak but insistent. She spoke no more, but she did not have to. The gala, the award, the deals waiting for him, vanished from his mind. All that remained was the fragile heartbeat pressed against his chest. His black SUV waited at the curb, its polished surface reflecting the streetlights. He placed her gently inside, wrapped in his jacket, and for the first time in years he ignored the buzzing of his phone. His assistant's sharp voice rattled about missed calls, collapsing deals, obligations that could not wait. But he ended the call with a simple truth. I am with someone. They would not understand, but he did not need them to. As the car hummed along the boulevard, Sophie sat silent in the back seat, clutching his coat like armor. Her eyes stared at the passing trees, though she seemed to be somewhere far away, lost in thoughts too heavy for her years. Then, suddenly, her voice returned. You don't have to keep me. The words shattered him. She spoke them not like a plea, but like a fact memorized from experience. She said she was always too much, too loud, too expensive, that if she could only be good enough, maybe someone would keep her. Landon gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He pulled the car aside, twisted to face her, and said firmly, You are not too much. You never were. For a fleeting moment her lip trembled before she bit it hard to hide it. He did not push further. Not yet. Trust had to be built brick by brick, not demanded. When they reached his estate, Sophie whispered, This doesn't look like a place for kids. He swallowed the lump in his throat and answered, It did not used to be, but that can change. She hesitated at the doorway, her body tense as though entering would erase her last shred of safety. He knelt beside her, promising warmth and security, but leaving the choice hers. After a long pause, she nodded. He carried her inside, through marble floors and glowing chandeliers that suddenly felt more like prison bars than treasures. In the den, the only room that still held meaning for him, he placed her gently on the couch and fetched a blanket. She curled into the corner, clutching his jacket, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Just before sleep claimed her, she whispered, If I stay quiet and do not eat much, can I stay a little while? The words tore through him. She was not bargaining. She was begging for the right to exist without being a burden. He sat across from her, voice quiet but steady. You do not have to earn a place here. You deserve better than what you have been given. She blinked, fighting something back, and finally, her hand uncurled slightly beneath his. It was a small gesture, but for Landon, it was everything. It was the beginning of a story neither of them had expected, but both desperately needed. For the first time in years, as the house settled into silence around them, Landon felt a flicker of something he had thought lost forever. Hope. The morning light filtered softly through the tall windows, painting golden streaks across the marble floors. Sophie stirred beneath the oversized blanket, her small frame barely taking up the corner of the couch. Landon had not truly slept. He had spent the night in the armchair across from her, watching her breathing as though it might stop if left unattended. His laptop remained closed, his phone ignored. Instead of boardrooms and contracts, his hours were consumed by the quiet rhythm of her fragile breaths. For the first time in years, he had chosen to miss an important meeting. He did not regret it. When Sophie opened her eyes, there was hesitation, as though she was unsure if she was allowed to wake in such silence. Landon offered her breakfast, fumbling through the kitchen like a man trying to recall a language he had forgotten. He made oatmeal, stirring cinnamon into it the way Emily used to, and brought it to her with a glass of orange juice. Sophie eyed the bowl suspiciously at first, but after tasting the warmth of cinnamon, she continued spoonful after spoonful. It was not a smile, not quite, but her expression softened just enough to suggest she had not expected kindness to taste like this. Later that morning, Sophie asked in a whisper if they could return to her room. Confusion shadowed Landon's face until she clarified, the motel, room 9B. He felt his chest tighten. He did not want to take her back. but the way she spoke of it, he realized it was the only place she knew as home. Reluctantly, he packed a small bag with clothes and a blanket and drove her through streets that grew grayer the farther they went. The motel was worn down, its yellow paint peeling, the neon sign flickering weakly. Sophie led him to the door with a small key hidden in her shoe. Inside, the air smelled of mildew, stale smoke, and hopelessness. She retrieved two things from a drawer: a crumpled report card with all A's and a child's drawing in purple crayon. On the paper were a heart, a stick figure, and the words, "Please do not forget me." Landon's throat tightened as he unfolded it. The drawing, so simple, carried more weight than any blueprint he had ever designed. Sophie asked only for one other item, Mr. Buttons, a small bear with one missing eye. As they prepared to leave, a neighbor in a torn hoodie mentioned that Sophie's mother had been taken by ambulance 2 nights earlier, while the man she had lived with disappeared. The pieces began to form a picture, one stained with neglect and abuse. On the drive back, Sophie whispered a question that pierced deeper than any silence. "Do you think she left me on purpose?" Landon slowed the car, searching for the right words. "No," he said firmly. "She did not." Sophie's eyes searched his face, as if testing whether he truly believed it. She did not answer, but she let him buckle her seatbelt again, a quiet acceptance that spoke louder than words. Returning to his home, Sophie walked hesitantly through the grand foyer, her small hand clutching the worn bear. Landon showed her a guest room upstairs, clean and untouched. At first, she only stood in the doorway, afraid to step onto sheets that looked too crisp for someone like her. He told her she could make it her own, and after a long pause, she placed Mr. Buttons gently on the pillow. That night, he made pancakes from a forgotten box in his pantry. She ate them slowly, savoring the crisp edges, and whispered that they were good. It was a small victory, but for Landon, it felt monumental. The nights were not without shadows. One evening he found Sophie crouched on the floor beside her bed, scrubbing the sheets with paper towels, tears clinging to her lashes. She had had an accident and was terrified of being punished. Her whisper cracked as she confessed that someone once told her she was disgusting. Landon knelt beside her, took the paper towels gently from her hands, and told her she was not anything they had said. He helped her clean, not with anger but with patience, and she watched him with wide eyes, as though waiting for the inevitable scolding that never came. By the time the sun rose, the sheets were washed quietly, pancakes waited again, and something unspoken had shifted. She whispered at breakfast, "You did not get mad." He simply replied, "No, I did not." And for the first time, she looked at him like maybe adults could be different. The days that followed grew into a rhythm neither expected. They planted sunflowers and cherry tomatoes in the garden, Sophie naming worms as though they were old friends. Landon found himself laughing in ways he had forgotten, the sound genuine and surprising. She began leaving him small gifts, a pressed daisy on his desk, a drawing tucked by his chair, each one a silent declaration that she was starting to believe in permanence. He framed her drawings, displayed the daisy carefully, as though these fragile tokens were treasures more valuable than the awards gathering dust on his shelves. When Sophie's mother, Catherine, remained unconscious at the hospital, Landon arranged a private suite. Sophie sat by her side, holding her hand, humming songs from memory. She did not cry, she did not beg, she simply stayed, her voice a thread trying to pull her mother back. Landon watched from the windowsill, silent witness to a bond unbroken by neglect or distance. Sophie told him about the songs her mother used to make up, about a rabbit who burned muffins in his bakery, and he listened with a lump in his throat. One evening, Catherine stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open, her gaze eventually settling on Sophie. The moment her daughter's name passed her lips, Sophie collapsed into her embrace with sobs that had been waiting for days. Landon stepped into the hall, his chest heaving with emotions he could not contain. The nurse passing by said softly, "It is good she woke up. You have been here every day." He nodded, unable to answer. When Catherine regained enough strength to speak, she told Landon she had never meant to abandon Sophie, that she had tried to protect her from Travis, that she had run out of time. Landon's reply was simple and resolute. "You did everything you could." You are here. That is what matters. Back at home, Sophie began to hum more, laugh more, even playfully declare herself CEO of sandwiches with one of his old ties. The house filled with warmth it had not known in years. Landon missed meetings without guilt, ignored phone calls, and spent afternoons chasing butterflies in the garden. Sophie drew a picture of them together, beneath a smiling sun, with Mr. Buttons sitting proudly beside them. She wrote beneath it, "Thank you for staying." Landon framed it on his shelf, replacing an old photograph he had once clung to. For the first time in years, his life was not defined by loss, but by the quiet miracle of being chosen by a child who had once believed she was forgettable. The days that followed did not explode with dramatic revelations, but unfolded in a quiet rhythm that felt like healing. Sophie no longer tiptoed down the staircase, but moved with the tentative confidence of someone who finally believed she belonged. She opened the refrigerator without asking, greeted the stray cat that wandered in from the neighbor's porch as though it were her roommate, and filled the silence of the house with questions that felt like music. Landon watched her with a tenderness he had thought lost, noticing not the grandeur of his estate, but the small proofs of safety scattered throughout it. When Catherine grew stronger, Landon arranged for her recovery at a rehabilitation center across the river, the best in Charleston. At first, Catherine protested. She said she did not want to be a burden, that she would manage on her own, but her voice faltered when she saw Sophie clinging to Landon's arm. With Catherine's consent, Landon filed for temporary guardianship so Sophie could legally remain with him while her mother healed. There was no grand announcement, no newspaper articles celebrating his decision, just a manila envelope from Cheryl, his attorney, and the quiet nod that told him this meant something deeper than contracts. Sophie did not ask about legal terms. She only wanted to know if she could still come home to him after school. His answer was simple: "You never left." Spring wrapped Charleston in a fragrance of jasmine and bursts of color from the cherry blossoms. Sophie filled the long days with laughter and wonder. She planted flowers, learned chess at the kitchen table, and declared she would beat him before her next birthday. He teased her that it sounded more like a promise than a threat, and she wagged her crayon-stained finger in reply. On her 7th birthday, she did not want balloons or a magician. She wanted one dinner, just with her and her parents, like a real family. Landon cleaned the house himself, strung fairy lights across the backyard fence, and cooked pasta with garlic bread, while Sophie drew a card in secret. Catherine arrived with careful steps, stronger than before, her eyes brighter, her smile unguarded. That night, under the fairy lights, Sophie laughed more than she ate, told stories without stopping, and gifted Landon a drawing that read, "Thank you for staying." He held it in his hands like a fragile treasure, unable to speak, so he pulled her close instead, letting silence carry the weight of gratitude. Later, when the house grew quiet again, he returned to his bookshelf. For years he had kept a photograph of Emily and a sonogram tucked away, proof of the life he had lost. That night, he took the photo down and replaced it with Sophie's drawing. In that simple act, he was not erasing the past, but choosing to let love define his present. His home, once sterile and echoing with silence, now pulsed with a new heartbeat, not from marble or chandeliers, but from laughter echoing down the hallway and the sound of tiny feet running across wooden floors. Sophie's joy was not limited to the house. She ran barefoot through Burwood Park, chasing kites and catching fireflies, her laughter trailing behind her like bells in the wind. Catherine, now settled in a small cottage nearby, joined them for picnics under the willow trees, and together they built something neither money nor success could buy. Sophie drew a picture of the three of them on a park bench, her words written in uneven purple crayon, "My safe place." Landon folded the drawing carefully and placed it where he could see it every day, a reminder that sometimes the most fragile gifts carried the greatest weight. One afternoon, they visited the Charleston Women's Shelter, where Catherine had begun volunteering. She sat with a young mother who held her baby with trembling hands, her voice brittle with fear. Catherine shared her story gently, not as a lesson, but as a connection, showing that even broken paths could lead to light. Landon, though hesitant at first, admitted that he was never supposed to be part of this story, but was grateful that he was. When they left, the young mother whispered, "Maybe I can do what you did." Catherine smiled and said softly, "You already are." Sophie skipped beside them on the way out, her hand in Landon's, unaware of the weight of hope she carried simply by existing. That night, Sophie sat in Landon's study spinning slowly in his chair, humming a made-up tune. She hopped down and pointed to his desk. "I saw where you put it," she said. "The drawing." He nodded. "It belongs there." Then she grew serious, looking up at him with eyes far too wise for her years. "You know, you are not just my safe place." Landon knelt so he could meet her gaze. "What am I then?" he asked. She whispered, "You are the reason I found my way back." The words struck him with a force he could not deflect. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly enough to feel the rhythm of her heart against his chest. "No, sweetheart," he whispered back. "You saved me too." When the house settled into silence and Sophie fell asleep, Landon walked into his study. On the shelf beside Sophie's framed drawing sat the pressed daisy she had given him weeks earlier, preserved between glass. It was fragile, imperfect, yet eternal, much like the bond they had built. He sat in the dim light, realizing at last that building something meaningful had never been about steel or stone, nor accolades from strangers. It had always been about love, patient and ordinary, born of small acts repeated daily until they became unshakable. The ache in his chest that had once been grief now felt like something new, something alive. It was no longer the weight of loss, but the foundation of hope. In the quiet of that night, Landon Reed, once a man celebrated for towering buildings and unyielding ambition, finally understood that the most enduring legacy he could ever create was not carved into skylines, but into the heart of a little girl who believed she belonged. And for him, that was everything. There are stories that slip past us like shadows, and then there are those that stop us in our tracks, reminding us that even in the darkest corners of life, light can still break through. Landon Reed was a man celebrated for his achievements, admired for his vision, yet hollowed by grief that wealth could not heal. He believed his life had ended with loss, but in one fragile whisper from a child, he found the beginning of something entirely new. Sophie, a little girl bruised by neglect, yet resilient enough to ask for help, became more than a responsibility. She became a reason to live, a reminder that brokenness can still bloom into beauty if someone chooses to stay. What makes this story powerful is not the grandeur of mansions or the elegance of galas, but the quiet courage of small acts. A bowl of oatmeal stirred with cinnamon, a stuffed bear with one missing eye, a crayon drawing taped proudly to a desk. These were not extravagant gestures. They were threads of love strong enough to weave two broken hearts into something whole. Sophie's trust was not given easily, yet Landon's patience built a foundation where her laughter could return, her fears could soften, and her hope could take root again. In turn, Sophie's presence healed Landon in ways no award or business deal ever could. Together, they reminded us that family is not only blood, but the choice to love when love is needed most. Catherine's return added another layer to this tapestry of healing. Her fight to protect Sophie, even in her weakness, revealed that sacrifice and resilience often go unseen until someone steps in to witness them. With Landon beside her, she discovered that she was not alone in carrying the weight, and together, the three of them shaped a family born not of perfect circumstances, but of second chances. Their story echoes a truth many of us forget. We are never defined solely by what we have lost, but by how we choose to respond when life places fragile souls in our hands. Perhaps the greatest legacy Landon will leave is not the towers that reach into the sky, but the safety he built in the heart of one little girl who believed she had been forgotten. Sophie's words, written in crooked crayon, captured what countless speeches could never say: "Thank you for staying." That is the power of presence, of refusing to walk away, of choosing to build a future not with steel or wealth, but with love. If this story has touched your heart, let it remind you that we all have the ability to be someone's safe place. A single act of compassion can change the trajectory of a life, and sometimes even save our own. Share this story, let it inspire you, and most importantly, do not forget to subscribe to the Retold Stories for more journeys of hope, healing, and the extraordinary power of love.